She was the last of her kind, until a human's touch melted. 3,000 years of frost asterisk. The mining drills screamed through layers of ancient ice on the distant moon of Kepler 442b. Jake Morrison wiped sweat from his brow, despite the sub-zero temperatures surrounding him. For 3 months, he had been leading this excavation for Titan Industries, officially searching for rare crystals that powered faster-than-light engines. Unofficially, he was chasing something far more valuable. The geological surveys had revealed massive structures buried beneath kilometers of frozen rock. Structures that didn't match any known architectural patterns from human colonies or the dozen alien species humanity had encountered. These ruins were older, more sophisticated, and completely untouched by time. Jake descended deeper into the excavation shaft, his thermal suit protecting him from the bitter cold that could freeze human blood in seconds. The mining robots had carved perfect tunnels through solid ice, their laser cutters revealing glimpses of metallic walls covered in strange symbols that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. His scanner beeped frantically as he approached the main chamber. The readings were impossible. Energy signatures that defied physics, biotraces that suggested something was still alive down here after countless millennia. Jake had sent his team back to the surface station 2 days ago, claiming concerns about structural integrity. In reality, he didn't want to share what he was about to discover. The tunnel opened into a cathedral-sized chamber that took his breath away. Crystalline formations jutted from the ceiling like frozen lightning, and the walls were covered in intricate carvings that told stories of a civilization that had reached for the stars when humanity was still discovering fire, but dominating. The center of the chamber was something that made his heart race. A stasis pod, easily the size of a small spacecraft, glowed with soft blue light. The crystal surface was perfectly smooth, and as Jake approached, he could see through to the interior. What he found inside defied everything he thought he knew about the universe. The being was clearly female, though definitely not human. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, with pale skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner radiance. Her features were sharp and aristocratic, with high cheekbones and full lips that suggested both beauty and strength. Long silver hair floated around her face as if suspended in liquid starlight. She wore armor that was clearly ceremonial, form-fitting plates that accentuated her figure while marking her as someone of great importance. Even in suspended animation, she commanded respect and admiration. There was something regal about her, something that spoke of ancient power and nobility. Jake's scanner showed that the pod's power systems were failing. Whatever had kept this being in stasis for thousands of years was finally breaking down. She had perhaps hours before the system collapsed entirely. He should have called for backup, should have followed protocol, and reported the discovery to his superiors at Titan Industries. But something about the sleeping figure called to him, a pull he couldn't explain or resist. She looked peaceful, but tragic, like a fairy tale princess waiting for someone to break an eternal curse. Jake found himself studying her perfect features, wondering what kind of civilization had produced such beauty, what kind of catastrophe had forced her into this eternal sleep. The control systems were complex, but followed a logical pattern that transcended language barriers. Jake's engineering background helped him decipher the alien technology, and he found what appeared to be an emergency revival sequence. His finger hovered over the activation control, knowing that once he pressed it, there would be no going back. He had no idea who or what this being was, whether she would be grateful for rescue or furious at being awakened. For all he knew, she could be dangerous, a weapon left behind by a warlike race. But looking at her serene face, Jake felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Wonder, purpose, the feeling that he was about to witness something miraculous. He pressed the control. The pod hummed to life with a sound like distant thunder. Its crystalline walls began to glow brighter as frost sublimated from the surface. Internal heaters activated, and the mysterious liquid inside started to drain away through hidden channels. Jake watched in fascination as the being's eyes fluttered, her chest beginning to rise and fall with the rhythm of returning life. When her eyes opened, Jake gasped. They were violet, like deep amethyst, with an inner light that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. There was intelligence there, awareness, and something else that made his heart race. Power, raw and ancient, that radiated from her very being. She sat up slowly, her movements graceful despite having been motionless for millennia. Water dripped from her hair and armor as she looked around the chamber, taking in her surroundings with the calm assessment of someone accustomed to command. When her violet eyes fixed on Jake, he felt as if she could see straight through to his soul. "Who dares disturb the Frost Queen's eternal rest?" she asked, her voice musical, but carrying the authority of someone who had never been denied an answer. Jake took a step back as the alien queen rose from her crystalline prison. Even soaked and disoriented, she commanded the space with a presence that made his knees weak. Her violet eyes swept over him with predatory grace, assessing whether he was threat or merely curious. "My name is Jake Morrison," he managed, his voice barely steady. "I'm a mining engineer. Your stasis pod was failing. You would have died if I hadn't activated the emergency protocols." The queen stepped gracefully from the pod, her bare feet touching the frozen ground without any sign of discomfort. She was even more magnificent standing before him, radiating power and beauty in equal measure. "A mining engineer," she repeated, moving closer. Jake could smell something exotic on her skin, like winter flowers and distant storms. "Tell me, Jake Morrison, what year is this by your reckoning?" "Standard Galactic calendar year 3847, he replied, watching her expression change from curiosity to something darker. The queen was silent for a long moment, processing the information. When she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of centuries. 3,000 years. My people, my empire, everything I knew has turned to dust and memory. The pain in her voice made Jake's chest tighten. Without thinking, he reached out to touch her arm, offering comfort. The moment his skin made contact with hers, electricity seemed to spark between them. Her eyes widened, and he saw something flicker there, surprise mixed with awakening desire. "Your people might still exist somewhere," Jake said softly. "The galaxy is vast, and records from your era are incomplete. There could be survivors, colonies that escaped whatever happened here." She studied his face, her violet gaze intense. "You would comfort me, human, even knowing what I am? What I was capable of? What were you capable of?" Jake asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. A smile played at the corners of her lips, both beautiful and dangerous. "I was Zara Nightfall, last queen of the Vorthic Empire. I commanded fleets that could shatter moons, armies that conquered star systems. I was called the Frost Queen because I could freeze the hearts of my enemies with a single glance." She moved closer, close enough that he could feel the cold radiating from her skin. "I was betrayed by my own council, poisoned, and placed in stasis, as punishment for refusing to destroy a peaceful world. They thought eternal sleep would be worse than death for someone like me." "But you're awake now," Jake said, his voice rough. "You're free." "Free?" Zara repeated, reaching up to trace her fingers along his jawline. Her touch sent shivers through his entire body. "Yes, I suppose I am. And I have you to thank for that, my brave little engineer." Before Jake could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the excavation site. Emergency lights bathed the chamber in pulsing red, and his communication device crackled to life. "Morrison, this is Director Hayes. We've detected massive energy. Signatures from your location. What's your status?" Jake cursed under his breath. He'd hoped to have more time before the corporate vultures descended. "Everything's fine, Director. Just some equipment malfunctions from the cold." "Negative, Morrison. We're reading biosignatures and power levels that suggest you've found something significant. Hold your position. We're sending a recovery team." The connection cut off, leaving Jake and Zara alone with the wailing alarms. She looked at him with raised eyebrows, her expression amused despite the danger. "Friends of yours?" she asked. "More like parasites," Jake replied grimly. "My employers. If they find you, they'll either want to study you like a lab specimen or turn you into a weapon." Zara's eyes flashed with violet fire. "Let them come. I have been caged for 3 millennia. I will not be caged again." The sound of approaching vehicles echoed through the chamber, growing louder by the second. Jake grabbed his equipment pack and gestured toward a side tunnel he'd mapped during his initial survey. "There's an exit through the old maintenance shafts. We can reach the surface and take my transport before they surround us." Zara nodded, but as they moved toward the tunnel, she paused at a wall covered in Vorthic symbols. She pressed her palm against one particular glyph, and a hidden panel slid open, revealing what looked like weapons and armor designed for her specific physiology. "My personal armory," she explained, quickly donning additional protective gear. "If we're to flee together, I prefer to be properly equipped." The armor transformed her from beautiful to magnificent, enhancing her already impressive figure while clearly marking her as a warrior queen. Jake found it difficult to concentrate on anything other than the way the dark metal accentuated every curve and line of her body. "You're staring," Zara observed with amusement. "Sorry, it's just ... "You're incredible," Jake admitted, feeling heat rise in his cheeks. Zara moved closer, backing him against the tunnel wall. Her armored form pressed against his body, and he could feel her heart beating through the metal plates. "Incredible enough to risk everything for?" "More than enough," he breathed. She leaned in, her lips barely brushing his ear as she whispered, "Then perhaps when we're safe, I'll show you just how grateful a Vorthic queen can be to her rescuer." The promise in her voice sent fire through his veins, but the sound of boots and weapons grew dangerously close. They slipped into the maintenance tunnel, beginning their flight from the corporate forces that would see them separated forever. The tunnels stretched for kilometers, a maze of passages that had once serviced the Vorthic Empire at the height of its power. Jake led the way with his scanner, while Zara moved behind him with predatory grace, her enhanced armor making no sound despite the metal plating. They'd been moving for 2 hours when they finally stopped to rest in a junction chamber. The air was warmer here, heated by geothermal vents that kept the ancient systems functioning. Jake had removed his heavy thermal suit, leaving him in basic work clothes. "Tell me about your world, Jake Morrison," Zara said, settling beside him. On a crystalline bench. "What drives humans to dig through frozen worlds in search of ancient secrets?" Jake looked at her, still amazed by her ethereal beauty. Curiosity, mostly. And greed, if I'm being honest. Humanity has always been explorers, pushing into the unknown, sometimes for knowledge, sometimes for profit. "And which are you?" Zara asked, moving closer. "I thought I was just looking for profit," Jake admitted. "But finding you, it changed everything. Made me realize I was searching for something I didn't even know I'd lost." Zara reached out and touched his chest, her palm resting over his heart. Even through her armored gloves, her touch sent electricity through his entire body. "What had you lost?" "Purpose. Connection. The feeling that there was something in the universe worth fighting for," he said, covering her hand with his own. "I've been drifting for years, taking corporate contracts and telling myself it was enough. But it wasn't. Not until I saw you." The alien queen's expression softened, and for a moment the predatory mask fell away entirely. Among my people, we believed that souls were created in pairs, scattered across time and space. Most never found their other half, but those who did, their bond was unbreakable. Do you think? Jake began, but the question was interrupted by the distant sound of pursuit. Hayes' mercenaries had found their trail. This way, Zara said, taking the lead. She moved through the tunnels with newfound purpose, as if ancient. Memories were guiding her steps. There's a place we can make our stand. They emerged into another vast chamber, this one filled with the remains of what had once been royal quarters. Despite the millennia, everything was perfectly preserved by the same technology that had kept Zara alive. My personal chambers, she said quietly, the last place I was happy before the betrayal. Jake looked around the room, imagining what it must have been like in its glory days. It's beautiful. You must miss it terribly. I did, Zara replied, turning to face him. But looking at you now, in this place that was once my sanctuary, I realize that home isn't a place. It's a person. The sound of approaching footsteps grew. Closer. They were trapped, but somehow Jake didn't feel afraid. With Zara beside him, he felt like he could face anything. The footsteps echoed through the ancient corridors, growing louder with each passing second. Jake checked his scanner and cursed under his breath. At least a dozen armed mercenaries. Military-grade weapons. Zara smiled, and there was something both predatory and protective in her expression. Let them come. They want to see what an ancient weapon can do? I'll show them. But before she could move toward the entrance, Jake caught her arm. Wait, before this gets violent, before we might not have another chance, there's something I need to tell you. Zara looked at him with those mesmerizing violet eyes, and he felt his heart racing. What is it, my brave engineer? I know we've only known each other for hours, but I feel like I've been waiting my whole life for this moment, Jake said, his voice rough with emotion. When I saw you in that pod, something inside me recognized you. Like you were the missing piece of my soul. Her expression softened completely, and she reached up to cup his face in her hands. You speak of the heart bond, something my people believed was the rarest and most precious gift in the universe. When two souls recognize their perfect complement in each other. Is that what this is? Jake asked, leaning into her touch. I believe it is, Zara whispered. And if we're to die here, at least we'll die together. The chamber door exploded inward, and Director Hayes strode in flanked by a dozen heavily armed mercenaries. His eyes widened when he saw Zara, taking in her alien beauty and obvious power. Well, well, Hayes said, his voice dripping with greed. Morrison, you've outdone yourself. Do you have any idea what this specimen is worth? The technology alone could revolutionize human civilization. She's not a specimen, Jake said, stepping protectively in front of Zara. She's a person, a queen. Hayes laughed coldly. She's an asset, one that belongs to Titan Industries by right of discovery. Step aside, Morrison, or we'll move you aside. I think not, Zara said, her voice carrying the authority of millennia. She stepped forward, and the temperature in the chamber dropped noticeably. Frost began forming on the walls, and the mercenary's breath became visible in the suddenly frigid air. You dare threaten me? She continued, her eyes beginning to glow with violet light. I am Zara Nightfall, last queen of the Vorthic Empire. I have frozen entire armies with my power. What makes you think a handful of corporate thugs could intimidate me? Hayes raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Zara raised her hand. Ice shot from her fingertips, encasing his weapon in crystal that shattered the metal like glass. The other mercenaries opened fire, but their energy blasts struck a barrier of swirling snow and ice that surrounded Zara like a protective cocoon. Impossible. Hayes breathed, backing away as the frost spread across the floor toward him. Your technology is impressive, Zara said, advancing on him. But it's nothing compared to the power of the Vorthik. We shaped worlds with our will, commanded the very forces of nature. Jake watched in amazement as Zara demonstrated her abilities. She moved like a dancer, her hands weaving patterns in the air that created walls of ice and spears of frozen energy. The mercenaries' weapons were useless against her power. Their shots either blocked or redirected back at them within minutes. The entire squad was either unconscious or retreating in panic. Hayes himself was trapped in a pillar of ice up to his neck, his face blue with cold, but his eyes still burning with greed. "You can't kill me," he gasped. "I have legal claim to this discovery. The courts will. The courts of a species that didn't exist when my empire ruled the stars?" Zara asked, her voice dangerously soft. "I think not." She raised her hand again, and Jake saw murder in her eyes. Without thinking, he stepped forward and caught her wrist. "Don't. You're better than this." Zara looked at him, her violet eyes still blazing with power. "He would have enslaved me, turned me into a weapon for his corporate masters." "I know," Jake said softly, "but killing him won't change that. It will only make you the monster he thinks you are." For a moment, the chamber was silent, except for the sound of Hayes' chattering teeth. Then Zara's expression softened, and the glow faded from her eyes. The temperature began to return to normal, though Hayes remained trapped in his icy prison. "You're right," she said, lowering her hand. "I am no longer the Frost Queen who conquered worlds. I'm something new, something better." She turned to Hayes, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You will return to your superiors and tell them that this moon is under the protection of the Vorthik. Any attempt to return here will be met with consequences beyond your imagination." With a gesture, she released Hayes from his icy prison. He collapsed to the floor, gasping and shivering, before scrambling to his feet and fleeing with the remnants of his squad. Jake and Zara stood alone in the chamber, surrounded by the evidence of her incredible power. She looked at him with something like wonder in her eyes. "You stopped me," she said. "You saw what I was capable of, and you still chose to trust me." "I told you," Jake replied, taking her hands in his. "I know who you are. Not the Frost Queen, not the Conqueror. I know Zara, the woman who was willing to sacrifice everything rather than destroy innocence." She smiled, and for the first time since her awakening, it was completely genuine. "Then perhaps we can build something new together. Not an empire, but a partnership. A love that bridges the void between species and time itself." 3 months had passed since Zara's awakening, and the frozen moon of Kepler 442b had become something unprecedented in galactic history. A sovereign world ruled by the last of the Vorthik Empire, and protected by a human who had chosen love over profit. Jake stood on the observation deck of their newly constructed habitat, watching Zara work in the garden she had created using her ice powers. She had learned to control her abilities with surgical precision, creating perfect growing conditions for plants from a dozen different worlds. The sight of her tending to earth roses alongside Vorthik ice flowers was a perfect metaphor for what they had built together. "The Galactic Council has agreed to recognize our sovereignty," Jake said, as Zara joined him on the deck. "They're calling it the Kepler Accords, the first treaty between humanity and a pre-contact civilization." Zara smiled, wrapping her arms around him from behind. Her touch no longer carried the bitter cold of her awakening, but a gentle coolness that he had come to associate with comfort and home. "And what of Titan Industries?" "Bankrupt," Jake replied with satisfaction. "Turns out their stockholders didn't appreciate having their most expensive mining operation frozen solid. Director Hayes was last seen working security for a cargo hauler in the Outer Rim. They had discovered that Zara's abilities were not just destructive, but incredibly precise. She could create sustainable ecosystems, purify water, and even generate clean energy through controlled fusion of ice crystals. What Titan Industries had seen as a weapon, the Galactic Council recognized as a solution to dozens of environmental crises plaguing colony worlds. The Centauri colonies have requested our help with their drought, Zara said, leaning back against Jake's chest. And the Mining Guild wants to hire us to cool their deep core operations on Vulcan Prime. Jake chuckled. From corporate slave to galactic consultant. Not bad for a mining engineer. And from frozen relic to something I never thought possible. Zara replied, turning in his arms to face him. A woman in love. Their lips met in a kiss that had become as natural as breathing over the past months. Jake still marveled at how perfectly they fit together, how her alien strength complemented his human ingenuity, how her ancient wisdom balanced his youthful enthusiasm. "I've been thinking about what you said," Jake murmured against her lips, "about souls being created in pairs. And what conclusion have you reached?" Zara asked, her violet eyes sparkling with amusement. "That maybe the universe isn't as random as we thought. Maybe your people were placed in stasis not as punishment, but as preservation. Maybe you were meant to sleep for 3,000 years, waiting for the right person to find you." Zara's expression grew serious. "Do you really believe that?" "I believe that love transcends species, time, and space itself," Jake said, taking her hands in his. "I believe that what we have is worth more than all the empires you conquered or all the prophets I once chased. I believe that we were meant to find each other." "Then you won't object to making it official?" Zara asked, her voice carrying a hint of nervousness that was completely at odds with her usual confidence. Jake's heart skipped a beat. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" Zara smiled, and suddenly she was every inch the regal queen he had first awakened. "Among my people, when two souls recognize their perfect bond, they perform the ceremony of eternal frost. It's a vow that binds them not just for this lifetime, but for all lifetimes to come. And among humans, we call it marriage," Jake replied, dropping to one knee. "Zara Nightfall, last queen of the Vorthic Empire, will you marry me?" Her answer was lost in a kiss she pressed to his lips, but the way ice crystals formed in the air around them, creating a crown of frozen starlight above their heads, told him everything he needed to know. Later, as they lay together in their bed watching the aurora that Zara's powers had created dancing across the moon's artificial atmosphere, Jake reflected on the journey that had brought them here. He had come to this frozen world searching for profit and had found something infinitely more valuable. "Do you ever regret it?" Zara asked softly. "Giving up your old life for an uncertain future with an alien queen?" Jake pulled her closer, marveling at how she had become his anchor in a universe full of possibilities. "Never. Not for a single moment. Even though I'm the last of my kind?" "No," Jake said, his voice filled with certainty. "You're not the last anymore. You're the first. The first of something new, something that bridges the gap between human and Vorthic, between past and future." Zara smiled, and Jake saw the future, reflected in her violet eyes. They would have children someday, he knew. A new generation that would carry the best of both species. They would explore the galaxy together, helping worlds in need, building bridges between civilizations. "I love you, Jake Morrison," she whispered, her words carrying the weight of a vow that would span eternity. "I love you too, Zara Nightfall," he replied. "My frost queen, my heart, my home." Outside their window, the aurora continued its eternal dance, a reminder that even in the coldest, most desolate places in the universe, love could bloom. The last of the Vorthic Empire had found her perfect match in a human mining engineer, and together they would write a new chapter in the story of the stars. The Frost Queen's long sleep was over, but her greatest adventure was just beginning.